Support comes from BECU, a member-owned credit union putting people over profit, offering financial services and support to the community with access to local financial centers, over 30,000 ATMs, and online resources at becu.org. Federally insured by NCUA.
Hey, good morning. It's Patricia Murphy. It's Thursday. This is Seattle Now. Christmas trees are big business here in the Pacific Northwest, and there's a science behind everything we love about them. I'll talk to Gary Chastagner, an expert who studied them for decades. But first, some headlines. There are 5 new cases of the Omicron variant of COVID-19 in King County. Health Officer Dr. Jeff Duchin said yesterday it's expected to spread explosively fast. 3 of the 5 newly found cases were in people who'd been vaccinated with 2 doses. 1 had received a booster shot. Washington State now has 11 confirmed cases of the variant since it was first identified about 3 weeks ago. There will be real fireworks at the Space Needle this New Year's Eve, but organizers say don't show up. It's just too difficult to celebrate safely with COVID, so instead they're working with a Bellevue-based company to create animation for an immersive digital streaming experience. The augmented fireworks show will be streamed on King 5 and available on the web soon after. And women's soccer is returning to Seattle. The championship-winning OL Reign are coming back after leaving for Tacoma 2 years ago. Lumen Field will be the soccer team's new home. Team officials say the OL Reign will begin playing there next year. It's only 9 days until Christmas. For a lot of people, this is their holiday. The lights, the movies. Few people can resist a holiday cookie, and for some, the perfect tree is what pulls it all together. And despite what you may have heard, there is no shortage of Christmas trees here in the Evergreen State. We grow a ton of them. Washington grows hundreds of thousands of them every year. One of the places they're grown is at Pfaff's Old Time Farm in Auburn. Eric Pfaff co-owns the place with his sister, and he says he's still got trees, but you may have missed the best ones.
Seems like people wanted to come out. They wanted to get out of the house and see something, do something different.
Yeah.
So they were quite anxious, and it seems like it's happening sooner. We open the day after Thanksgiving, but people like to come the week before.
Oh, wow.
And we should probably open up the week before, maybe next year, just because people want it sooner.
People were really ready for it this year, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the record, I can spot at least a half a dozen trees I'd consider grabbing. Noble fir and Doug fir are, of course, the most popular, but Eric likes to mix it up a bit. He leads me through a pasture of 2-foot-high trees to a cool little fir called a corkbark. Its trunk is white like a birch and visible through the branches. It's still small, but soon it will grow inches every year. Eric points out another unusual tree about the same size as the corkbark. This one is a white fir.
They're not obviously Christmas tree size yet,
Ooh.
but they have a unique needle to them.
Beautiful.
Real long needle, kind of a bluish color. You don't see a lot of them grown around here. Typically, they're not the real popular one, but once people see them, they like them, and they like them for their trees. They actually hold up pretty well. My sister tried one out in her house, and it had good needle retention, and it was a good tree.
Needles. No one likes them when they're not on the tree, and people like me start to get anxious when needles start dropping. To crack the Christmas tree code, you need to create trees that keep their needles. And that's where Gary Chastagner comes in. He's a researcher who studies Christmas trees, and needle retention is big. He's a plant pathologist for Washington State University at their research center in Puyallup, which means he studies diseases that affect plants. And he first got involved in Christmas trees in the late 70s when a disease was spreading among Douglas firs.
The industry was losing trees. They would shed so many needles prior to harvest that they couldn't harvest the tree. It didn't have any more marketability. So the industry went to the state legislature because there was no one working on Christmas trees at the time. They went to the state legislature in Washington. The state legislature basically told WSU that they needed to have someone working on Christmas trees. I was the new kid on the block, had been harvested in 1978. I think it's the only time the dean has ever come to my office. And he came to my office and said, Gary, we need someone to work on Christmas trees. You're in Western Washington. You sound like the perfect person. And so we started working on Christmas trees as a result of that. And so what turned out to be about a 3-year project raised so many research questions because we did post-harvest trials, observed some things that it's just continued for the past 40 years.
Oh my gosh. So you actually were called in to solve a big problem.
Yeah, it was a pretty big problem back then. I think in the early 80s it was causing losses of about $3.4 million.
Okay, so you were talking about potentially $3.4 million in losses, which means that this is a huge industry in Washington State. Can you help me, give me a sense of what we're talking about in terms of economy here?
Well, I don't think of it so much as just Washington State, the Pacific Northwest, Western Washington, Western Oregon primarily. But in Western Washington, Western Oregon, we produce about 40% of a total U.S. production of Christmas trees. This is a major production region. I think overall the state of Washington ranks about number 5 in the nation as far as production. So it's a pretty significant industry.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your work. What makes a quality tree, Gary?
Well, I get asked a lot of times what the perfect Christmas tree is, and the perfect Christmas tree is really in the eye of the beholder.
Well played, Gary, well played.
That's one advantage you have of choosing cut farms is you can find your perfect Christmas tree because it may have one side, and you want a one-sided tree, etc. But really a perfect Christmas tree from my standpoint, or an ideal tree, is a tree that has the characteristics that you're looking for, whether it's stiff branches, things like this to hold heavy ornaments, good quality needles that don't have defects, and more importantly, needles that stay on the tree when it's cut and displayed. And part of that is good moisture retention of the trees and the ability of the cut trees to maintain moisture levels.
Yeah, nobody likes needles all over the floor. It's anxiety-inducing as well. Let's talk a little bit about consumers and what they're looking for, because needles, definitely, we want the needles to stay on the tree. We want a good smell, right? Atmosphere is very important when it comes to Christmas tree. Which tree would give me the best smell?
So the aroma or fragrance on Christmas trees, there's tremendous variation. You look at Douglas fir. Douglas fir has a very pronounced aroma. If we run at our research center in Puyallup, we have 2,000 square foot temperature controlled display rooms. So we can
put Christmas year-round in there.
About 100 trees in each room.
Wow.
And if the room is filled with, let's say, Douglas fir, you open the door and you walk into that room, you know that there's Douglas fir there. They have a very pronounced fragrance or aroma. Other trees that we grow do not have that much aroma, but maybe they have other highly desirable characteristics. And so most species will have a small, varying levels of aroma. Things like a noble fir are not going to have the aroma that a Douglas fir, but noble fir has a number of highly desirable characteristics that if you want a tree that lasts for a longer period of time, noble fir, Turkish fir, Nordman fir.
How much time can I get out of my Christmas tree? Should I be buying it the day after Thanksgiving if I'm hoping to not have a crispy tinderbox by Thanksgiving? Is there a way to do that?
There are important things that consumers can do that affect how long the tree lasts. So, for example, let's use Douglas fir as an example. If I display Douglas fir, cut it and take it to my home and display it indoors without any water, okay, it's a tree that'll last maybe 10 days, 10 to 14 days before there's browning, some needle shedding, and things like this. If I display that Douglas fir, properly care for it, display it in water, maintain the water level in the stand, it's going to last for 3, maybe 4 weeks. Okay. If I take a noble fir, a Turkish fir, a Nordman fir, and cut it and display it dry, it's typically going to last for about 3 weeks dry.
Wow.
Okay? If I display those trees in water, we've been able to maintain them for 3 months, and they'll actually break bud and start growing.
That explains last year's Christmas tree, Gary.
And so there's tremendous variability. So what's important is for people to understand how long they want to display their tree, and then when they go to either a retail lot or a choose and cut farm, is to ask which species they're growing that best fit what they need for the length of time, because there's a tremendous difference.
When you visit people's houses, do you judge their Christmas tree? Are you looking for do you have a preference when it comes to branch facing?
So when I visit people's houses, those people that know I do a lot of work on Christmas trees, and these are some of my own relatives, they apologize to me if they have an artificial tree. And I have the perspective that if that artificial tree is meeting their needs at that point in time, I hope they have a great Christmas and enjoy that tree and celebrate Christmas. The thing that the industry is working on is trying to make sure that you eliminate some of the concerns that people have had about real trees, the experience that some of the people that have had about real trees. They don't want a messy tree. So let's make sure that we're selling trees and stuff that have good needle retention. We're not creating a situation where someone's going to choose an artificial tree because they had a negative experience with a real tree, and their perception is that you don't have those issues with artificial trees.
Gary Chestagner, really great to talk to you. Thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Caroline Chamberlain Gomez produced today's show, which is also made by Jenny Cecil Moore, Diana Opong, Clare McGrane, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our theme music. I'm Patricia Murphy.